everyone. What a week it has been here in the US. The culmination of many months and years of trying to determine who is going to be in office here in the United States. And for many folks in the LGBTQ plus community, it has been a tense period of time wondering who would take office, and many people hoping it would not be Donald Trump, and everybody pulling for Kamala Harris or vice versa. No matter where people have fallen in the spectrum of things, it's been a period of intense feelings, apprehension, worry for many, many months, not only here in the US, but probably abroad as well. And full disclosure, I am not a super political person. I tend to be more in the middle of the road, moderate, I would suppose, and I don't really like to talk about politics, and I don't like to talk about things that are not that I'm disinterested in it. I feel that there's so much more that's in my control, in my mind, that I like to focus on. However, because in noticing people's reactions, and I remember what it was like 8 years ago when Donald Trump first took office in 2016, the reactions that were around there as well, I felt that it was really important to really lean hard into resilience and lean into the things that are accommodating to actually being a person of grit, somebody who can withstand the winds, however they're blowing, and whatever political persuasion you're in, whatever things you believe, wherever part of the world that you're in. I feel like this time is a period to kind of step back and kind of reassess what it is that you control in your life, and not necessarily what the winds of the world are trying to blow you about for. This is where I've actually been able to utilize a lot of things that I've been talking about to really become objective and dial down the emotion. It's really strange. Like, I tend to be someone who, when there's a super stressful moment in my life where, like a crisis, some kind of emergency or something like that, something just clicks in for me where I just kind of like somehow mentally step back a little bit, and it's almost like, is David, are you home? What's going on inside you? It's almost like I'm unaware of what's happening. It's not that I'm ignorant about things or I'm naive about things. It's like I'm really going into a place, and I've kind of trained myself this over my lifetime of having gone through some really, really difficult things in my life, to really go to a place where I have more of a sense of control. And in looking at people's responses online and reading things and talking with people and their reactions were very similar to reactions that I remember witnessing in people 8 years ago. And then, as in now, I didn't have that type of reaction. I had more of a like reserved kind of feeling of like, I'm going to control what's going on inside me. I'm not going to react, because I feel like when my emotions get hijacked, it's like it's almost like a runaway train, and I have like zero control, and it takes so much time to reel it back. And I just want to encourage everyone, one, this is not a place to shame anybody for however anybody may have voted here in the US, or whether they voted or not at all, or what your beliefs are, whether or not you live in the US, whether you're gay or straight or whatever it is. My whole standpoint is really taking charge of your feelings and your thoughts about situations, people, relationships, and asking yourself, what is it that is within my control here? What is it that I can dial down and really think through rationally? I actually started to kind of step back several weeks ago. I watched actually most of the Democratic convention, and I watched big pieces of the Republican National Convention as well, because I have always been someone who wants to not take at face value what people say, like say what they say. They want me to believe something, whether it's online or a family member or something I read or anything like that. I've always been someone who wants to take in information and decide for myself how I'm going to react to that information. I think this goes way back to a time when I was very super conservative. I was definitely on the other side of things for sure. And I believed really strongly in a lot of things, because I was very deeply religious at the time. And even then, I had been running around in circles of people who were what you might deem as fundamentalist Christian or whatever. And even then, when people try to impress on me a view that they thought I should hold, or a belief that I should be, or a way of acting, I always thought to myself, like, well, okay, so why do you think that? I was never going to take some kind of like black and white, here it is, this is the way the world works, you got to believe it or not. I say it, it's in the Christian circles, it's in the Bible, this is what I believe. And I've never really like ascribed to that, even though I still consider myself a very deeply spiritual person. I always questioned if people wanted to try to force their will on me to believe something that I hadn't really come to terms with myself, or that I had not really like seen the whole broad spectrum of things. And I feel like that has always served me. And I can tell you on both sides, at least in the U.S. and party, Republican or Democratic, I have seen both extreme black and white views. And I've seen very, what I would deem also fundamentalist views on both sides as well. It's like this black and white, you got to believe this or you're out. Or these people are like this, and this whole blanket globalization of how someone is. And I just feel like that's not the way to treat people. People are not headless torsos walking about in the world. They have feelings, they have a soul. In my belief, they have a soul. They come from somewhere. And I feel like when you like bring it down, I know Brene Brown talks a lot about this, when you bring it down to a place where you're one-to-one with somebody and they're not like one big global mass of people where they have no face and you don't know who they are, it's really easy to depersonalize that. But I've always been someone who I'd rather dial it down, and really be personal. And I know in the gay community, it's really hard not to be like that. It's really hard to avoid being so global because it's at least in an urban community. I can't really speak for necessarily a rural community or a small town or whatever, but I know where there are constellations of groups of people, there is a tendency to want to, and I've seen this in churches too, where there's a tendency to have this kind of group think where you have to like ascribe to whatever that particular overarching belief is, and if you're not with the program, you are cast out as an outsider. And that doesn't even have to be in political things. It could be, that's why I think cliques are formed. It's like this security, and it's really a kind of a false sense of security that keeps you all, these are the safe people. I need to keep the safe people around me. I'm just sharing this to kind of give a framework for how I've thought about the last week and how I've kind of digested things. And I think when people get emotionally charged, it kind of like short circuits reason and rational thinking. And I think it's really super important to just really step back and lean into self-care. I feel like the biggest thing, and having gone through a recent breakup, this is what I did. I mean, it was very hard, but I leaned harder into self-care. I worked out. I took care of the food I was putting in my body. I connected with people. I leaned hard. I read things. I just was really focused on David. I really focused on it. I did not turn into a global, even though I had anger and I had emotions that were coming up and broiling up inside of me, that I was very tempted to let that train take off the track and go run it off a cliff, but I pulled it back in. And I feel like that is the same principle that applies when you are super emotionally charged about something. And the reason is because going and allowing yourself to go on a runaway train and going to God knows where off the cliff or into oblivion, it doesn't do you very much justice, because you're not really delving into who you are as a person. And again, not making it about political beliefs or persuasions. It's mainly about my concern is for myself. How am I taking care of myself? Am I giving myself enough sleep? Am I filling my body with good things? Am I working out? Or am I punishing myself? Am I so depressed and anxious that I'm going to like emotionally eat every piece of candy and ice cream and pie and carbs and all these things to the point where I'm bloated and gassy and I'm just really miserable and on the toilet all the time? Or are you going to really take care of yourself? You're going to hydrate yourself. You're going to eat really good things. How are you going to take care of yourself? Because I feel like when the emotions start to take place, there's this imbalance that starts to happen, and then there's a need to regulate it. And the ways of regulating could be some of these, like eating poor eating choices, or drinking a lot, or engaging in a lot of like recreational substances, whatever it takes to just escape, versus like going in the middle and pressing through it. And I feel like this is the most important thing. And I'm saying just to be good to yourself, whatever it is. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel you can. So I take that back. You're entitled, and everyone is entitled to the feelings that they have. Whether that's guilt or anger or rage, those are your feelings. You can't be, disparaged for them one way or the other. However, you are someone who actually has control over those feelings, and so you can react to them, and you can find ways to actually frame them for your good. And the funny thing, like in the work environment, when I've gone through all kinds of different things in the work environment, where there was a period of time that was like super reactionary, and it was like almost like a victim for me, where I just demanded things. And I feel like to a large extent, a lot of gay men can tend to struggle with things like this, because if you're put down, or you're in any kind of minority class, if you're put down, if you're traumatized, if you're always being told no, or if you're always having laws set up against you, there is unfortunately something that happens where it's like you're always like pushing out against, and you're putting up shields to fight against it. And that creates a way of thinking and behaving that sometimes it can serve you, but a lot of times it won't serve you, or it creates just really bad vibes around with people. And I know I had to agree, I carried things like that in relationships, and I carried things like that into the work environment. But it was when I started to really like step back, and I actually started doing this because I did feel anxious about the way things were political. I was severely anxious over the summer. I felt anxious in the springtime. But as we got closer, I started to kind of reevaluate and focus on other things where I could put my mind on stuff. And this is a funny tactic, and I don't know if it would really resonate with anybody. But if you've ever worked with a spreadsheet, for example, if you've ever worked in data entry, or if you've ever done something that feels really tedious, like washing dishes or taking out the garbage or gardening maybe, I don't know what it is. If you ever found something that you just kind of repetitively keep doing the same thing, repetitively keep doing it, it's like, oh my God, can I please stop this? Can I take a break from it? What's interesting is that repetitiveness and that like tediousness of it can actually kind of siphon off some of that anxiety and some of that emotional charge that's happening. And I started to do that. This is where I go into my own little world, and I start to solve problems that are in my life, not problems related to the political environment, not problems related to the world, but just everyday things for David. Things that I want to work on, little projects. And I just like create a whole bunch of different projects, and I just started working on them. I started thinking about them. And you know what it did? It made me hopeful. It made me looking forward to the future, because if you feel that the world is bleak and that there is no way that it's ever going to improve, and that's all you think on, and that's all you ruminate on, it's like you're just going to be zeroed in on that, and it's just going to magnify. But if you can take your mind off of it and find ways to just like lean into self-care and really connect with people, and not just glom on to the negative, environment that's out there, but just find other things to do, you can still be well read about it. You can still, within reason and, moderation or whatever, still look at what in the news, but just like kind of just like take a step back and just be okay and lean into your own needs, versus trying to predict and trying to ruminate and trying to control, because you can't really control it. Here, it's done deal. We got 4 years, and this is what we have. And there's, are you going to do something with those 4 years? Are you going to do something, or lean into, you're going to make yourself a better person, or you're going to improve yourself? Or are you going to go hide in a tunnel? Are you going to hide in the ground? Are you going to go off the rails and just be a horrible, hateful, bitter, nasty person? Or are you going to try to find your better self? And I feel like um, people who I've studied and stories that I've read, and I'm still listening to this audio by David Goggins called oh no, it's escaping me. Can't Hurt Me. I am so impressed. This guy, he's been through so much. Like, I mean, he grew up in very abusive circumstances, in poverty. He had just so much. He'd witnessed murders. I mean, as a child, as an 8-year-old child or so, he had all these traumas, and then he found his way out and became a Navy SEAL. I'm in the section of the book now where he's doing these ultra marathons where he's got to like run for 24 hours or 33 hours or some crazy amount. And he's like got broken bones and all this stuff. And he says he goes through, he went through this place where he goes into his mind where he's like thinking on things. And he calls it a toolbox that he goes in, he dives into, and he solves problems. And I feel like, like my spreadsheet example is a way that I'm solving problems. I'm in the middle of something that's creating me a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And oh my God, what if somebody comes after me and all these things? But if I just like kind of focus my attention on something else, I can let that just kind of like sit over to the side, and I could like gain a little bit of control. I really highly recommend this book if you've not read it, by Viktor Frankl, The Doctor and the Soul. Super good. He was a concentration camp survivor, and same principles. He goes into his mind and he like talks, and he does not like engage in the guards that are trying to egg him on. And I feel like if anything, grit would mean this, where you just do not let them provoke you, and you don't let those outside things like hook you in a way that you're going to cause you to like, oh, here goes the train, it's going off the cliff. Because you are in control, and developing a framework for yourself is a way to finding peace. And again, leaning into self-care that leads to the ability to sit in resilience and be able to face those storms and those headwinds so that you can feel safe and comfortable and regulated. It's not easy, and no one said it's hard, and no one says it's fair, but it's either be a victim or it's be someone who's going to be a victor and who's going to actually find the way, find the path to who's going to help yourself and find that true way of being and being in the world.